People who are homeless or on the streets have the most at stake in an election, but ironically, they face the most hurdles.
Tonight, Canadians hit the polls across the country. We take a look at a non-profit helping the homeless vote in Vancouver.
In February, when we usually have minus 30 to 40 through the entire month, we had minus 4.
We go to Old Crow Yukon, where residents say climate change is threatening their way of life.
Almost everyone that we talk to has big dreams for how they can create abundance and economic growth for their community and their nation and their family.
And tourism entrepreneurship in the north, how to get into this booming industry. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. It's Election Day in Canada. For the past 40 days, we've been hearing promises from party leaders. Tonight, we find out who will lead the country for the next 4 years. And APTN News will have live coverage as the ballots are counted, starting at 8 p.m. tonight. That's Eastern Time. The Assembly of First Nations has identified 63 so-called priority districts, places where they believe that First Nations voters could determine the outcome of those seats. There are also a record number of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit candidates running in this election. 62 candidates have identified as Indigenous, an increase from the record set in 2015 with 54 Indigenous candidates. We will have a number of guests on throughout the evening to help us analyze and break it all down. They'll be joining us from Ottawa and Winnipeg, as well as on the West Coast and in the North. Again, our live special election coverage of Vote 2019 begins tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 7 p.m. Central. After her rally in Edmonton on Friday, which drew thousands, climate activist Greta Thunberg traveled to Fort McMurray. While in the heart of the oil sands country, Thunberg met with both Athabasca Chippewa and Mikisew Cree First Nation leadership. The meetings were private. There was no media. AFCN Chief Alan Adam explained to Thunberg how Indigenous communities can invest in oil and gas and still respect the environment.
We explained to her that how our community-based monitoring program works, you know, alongside with industry and everything and the benefits that come from it. And also she was quite amazed by our story about how we managed to work alongside with industry, even though we have different opinions.
A nonprofit on Vancouver's downtown east side is helping those who have no fixed address or identification to be able to vote in today's federal election. APTN's Tina House has the story.
We got a first customer.
The Union Gospel Mission is a place that helps people with emergency shelter, addiction recovery, education, affordable housing, and daily meals for those living in poverty. And this year, once again, they are also helping homeless people to vote in the federal election.
People who are homeless or on the streets have the most at stake in an election, but ironically, they face the most hurdles.
There are thousands of people that are homeless just in the city of Vancouver alone. This hidden part of our society have remained voiceless for a long time, including Richard Vanderwall. He spent years dealing with addiction and homelessness, and he says exercising his democratic right to vote means a lot to him.
I think it's extremely important because, you know, every life matters. It really does. A person's socioeconomic status should never, you know, be in the way of what they think or like who they are in society.
Michael Nardacchione is a volunteer that helps anyone who's interested to get registered to vote.
Okay, this paper here is for people who don't have ID, but they come to the center and they use the services, you know, either for lodging, for food, for clothes, and for social and, addiction problems. We know them, meaning the Union Gospel Mission staff know them, and the workers know them. This is for a confirmation of residence. If they don't have a place to live, well then we'll vouch for them because they come here.
Jeremy Hunka is with the Union Gospel Mission. He says this program is available in most cities across Canada.
We do it most elections. It's always a little bit different depending if it's municipal, provincial, or federal, but it's really important we try and make it happen.
Was it
difficult to get Elections Canada to sign on to something like
Actually, no. Elections Canada has been really great about getting people an opportunity to vote. They've been answering all our questions and hosting the polls really close by at a UGM building, and it's really amazing to see.
Richard has some advice to those that don't think that they can vote because of being homeless.
Come out of the shadows, stand up and be counted.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Well, we want to hear what you're thinking. Here's how you can continue the conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptn news. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. Despite all the hoopla throughout the 40-plus day election campaign, many Indigenous people yet again find themselves on the sidelines. The English language leaders debate featured for the first time a section on, quote, Indigenous issues, end quote. But by some accounts, that discussion didn't go very far. So APTN teamed up with the Discourse to find out what Indigenous voters want to hear from party leaders and candidates. Discourse editor Lindsay Sample joins us from Vancouver to share some of the results. Lindsay, thanks for joining us. I would like to hear your thoughts on that leaders debate and how the idea for this collaboration came about.
Yeah, so I mean, like many people, I was watching that leaders debate, the English language debate, and just feeling frustrated by the responses. And the Discourse and APTN had partnered previously to work on a project called Tracking Trans Mountain, which was focused on listening to communities impacted by the Trans Mountain Pipeline project and finding out where they were at. So we knew that APTN was a great partner, and we really wanted to focus on what questions underserved communities had and what questions weren't being heard in this election cycle. And so we were able to pretty quickly come together and just ask that question.
APTNnews.ca published an op-ed by former Executive Director of News Karen Pugliese. In it, she said that the discussion would have been different had an Indigenous journalist been included to moderate. What did you hear generally from readers who shared their questions or concerns? And can you give us a couple of examples?
Yeah, so I think that the amazing thing when you ask the public what questions they have is you get really powerful answers and responses, and so I did pull up a couple here, and I think that they're pretty telling for anyone who didn't watch the debate. You know, it ended up just being a conversation mostly about pipelines, and Indigenous issues were categorized as one thing, and it was about the environment or it was about pipelines, and that was it. And the questions that came forward, one says here, you know, what does the Indian Act mean to you? I'd like to ask all candidates that. Or, you know, will you ensure that all recommendations of the TRC of the report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls are implemented? You know, how come constitutional genocide is never discussed? What will you do to address systemic racism in Canada? These are really big questions and tough questions that weren't really asked, or if asked, weren't answered.
What do you think the impact would have been if tough questions like that had been put to politicians ahead of the election?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you would have seen a campaign. It would have been nice to see a campaign that was built around policy and real discussions around issues impacting people's lives. And that's not the campaign that we've seen. We've seen very little conversations about the big issues and policies facing our time and our communities. And I think that, you know, if not an election, you know, when are we going to have these conversations? So I think that it could have been a different conversation, and I also think that moving forward, if you look at the questions that were asked, this is something that can be asked of whoever will be Prime Minister tomorrow. Well,
and I guess we'll find out very shortly who's going to be Prime Minister tomorrow. Lindsay, thanks so much for taking the time to share your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
We've got to take a quick break now, but first here's a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting off on the east coast, we've got 7 and rain in St. John's, 15 and lots of sun in Halifax. Happy Valley Goose Bay is a mix of sun and cloud, 5 degrees, 5 in Cartwright as well. Chibougamau is 10 with a mix of sun and cloud, 11 in Quebec City, a mix of sun and cloud. 13 and rain in North Bay, Ottawa, 16 and rain, 13 and rain in Sault Ste. Marie. Sioux Lookout and Thunder Bay, cloudy and 10 degrees. Big Trout Lake, cloud and 8. 1 with a mix of sun and cloud in Thompson. 2 and some snow in Norway House. 5 and rain for Winnipeg. 8 with a mix of sun and cloud in Brandon. 8 for Regina and Saskatoon. 9 for Swift Current. Sunshiny down in the southern portion of Saskatchewan. 4 and sunny in Uranium City. 2 and sunshine in La Ronge. Welcome back. Canada's largest Inuit population might not actually be in the north. Ottawa's growing Inuit community has them neck and neck with Iqaluit for the most Inuit. Our Iqaluit video journalist Kent Driscoll went to Ottawa to find out how hard it is for the Inuit to move south. This is his story from Ottawa.
If you're an Inuk living in Ottawa, you probably know this place. Tunga Suvingat Inuit, known as TI, is the Ottawa-based clearinghouse for all things Inuit. They run 20 different programs for the many Inuit who live in Ottawa. How many? The census claims there's only 1,280 Inuit living in Ottawa-Gatineau. TI says that number's at least 3,700, maybe as many as 6,000. There are almost 4,000 Inuit in Iqaluit, 28,000 in all of Nunavut. Amanda Killabuck is TI's Director of Employment and Education. She's been in Ottawa for 3 years, but still misses some things from home.
The clean air, the fresh, crisp air, especially around this time of year, just when the snowfall just comes down. That's what I miss.
Ottawa has long held a special connection for Nunavummiut on Baffin Island. It's the first stop on a plane going south.
Well, it's one of the few direct flights, right? Montreal's the other, which also has a large Inuit population. But a lot of people come here for medical, and a lot of times it's extended medical. And so they have to stay here for whether it's cancer treatment or dialysis or any other specialized services that they can't get in Nunavut. Then we have students that come down for post-secondary. We have families that come down for that they need specialized services, like for learning supports, autism. We also have a lot of wards of the government, so through group homes and other institutions.
Here, TI provides everything from prenatal care to education and skills training. Getting off the plane in Ottawa can be a real disorienting experience, according to Killabuck.
I think it's culture shock, especially if you're not from Iqaluit and you're from a smaller community and you come and it's just learning the transit system, even parking lots. I know when I took my kids for vacation, they just run around because they think that the cars will see them, didn't understand the concept of sidewalks, or if you're really in a smaller community, car seats.
Across the city, there's another group of Inuit who have recently moved to Ottawa. The Nunavut Civic Nuksavut School is like a grade 13 program for Nunavut Inuit high school graduates. They spend a year far away from home, learning about home while living in Ottawa. Moving here can also be a shock.
There's really no comparison, because Cambridge Bay is completely different. It's really small compared to here. You could probably fit my whole community on one block. That's how small Cambridge Bay is.
I come from a really small town, so Inuit are the majority, and it's so diverse here. There's all different kinds of people from all over the world, and it's just so like diverse.
Just like any Inuk who packs up and heads to the city, these students faced major change.
Oh, it was the whole experience, but it's still confusing to me. Moving here at 17. Moving out of my home environment or to a place where I don't really know well and I don't know a lot of people, it's pretty nerve-wracking, and it can get nervous at times, but there's a really good support system here.
Nunavut has Canada's youngest and fastest growing population. The number of Inuit in Ottawa isn't going down. It's going up with every flight that lands from Iqaluit. More and more Inuit are leaving the north for the cheaper prices and warmer weather of the south. And Ottawa is usually the first stop. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Earlier this month, the Yukon declared a climate emergency. It's the first province or territory in Canada to do so, but the community of Old Crow in northern Yukon declared an emergency back in May. APTN's Chris McIntyre went there to find out why.
In February, when we usually have minus 30 to 40 through the entire month, we had minus 4.
Hunting, fishing, and trapping is the normal way of life for residents of the isolated community of Old Crow. Paul Josie, a fisherman and member of the Untitled First Nation, has been fishing on the Porcupine River for most of his life.
Everything is more expensive for us, freight, materials, and for that we live a subsistence lifestyle. We try to harvest what we can off the land. With all these changes, it's making changes to the caribou, the fish, and all types of wildlife, you know, from the smallest bumblebee to the largest moose. Anything that changes in that cycle has a huge effect on all of them.
Josie has been noticing some significant changes.
The caribou that are not crossing the porcupine, they are named the Porcupine caribou herd because they cross twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall, to the wintering grounds. We haven't seen them go back to the wintering grounds as they used to in a long time. There was a small herd last winter, and they came through in the spring, and this fall there hasn't been much crossing the river at all.
All along the river, the land and trees are slumping, causing potentially devastating effects to the fish species. Within the community, most structures are built on stilts and can't be built on the ground. The heat from the buildings would melt the frozen ground and they would start to sink. This past summer, Vuntutquitchin Chief Dana Tizia-Tram declared a climate emergency.
Our village of Teach It, Old Crow, it's at the bottom of an ancient lake bed. And so the permafrost is what's holding together our land. And in some places, you only need to go a couple feet to get to this permafrost. So once the permafrost starts melting, it changes the topography. If you have hundreds of lakes and the permafrost that starts letting go, the land looks like snakes weaving through the waters. And if these lands start letting go, then water's going to really change their movements. And same with the bluffs and the trees. Basically, you can think of it, if you could fast forward it in your mind, the land is changing and melting right underneath our feet.
The declaration sparked a conversation between the Yukon First Nations and both the territorial and the federal government. Climate change is becoming a main topic for people here in the north.
Chief Tizia-Tram says his community will continue to use science while maintaining their traditional ways to adapt to the changing environments. As the entire region of 54,000 square kilometers slowly melts, the community of Old Crow remains the poster for climate change in the Yukon.
As a people that are very porous to the lands and the animals that we are woven from them, we feel these changes, these movements in the web, and we move with them. And it's very worrisome, even within, we think in generations, but now we're thinking in a generation. And people need to know about this.
Chris McIntyre, APTN National News, Old Crow.
It's time for us to take another break, and here's the rest of your weather forecast for tomorrow. To northern Alberta, we've got 3 in sunshine in Fort Chip, 4 in snow in Fort McMurray, 8 in rain in Edmonton, 10 in a mix of sun and cloud in Calgary. Kamloops will be rainy and 10 degrees, as is Penticton, 13 in cloud in Tofino. Dease Lake is snow and 1 degree, 6 in rain in Prince George. Old Crow -1 in snow, -2 in sunny in Dawson City. -4 in sunshine in Norman Wells. Waties is snowing and -3. Paulatuk -5 with a mix of sun and cloud. In Nunavut, snowing and -5. -3 in snow in Cambridge Bay, -9 and a mix of sun and cloud in Baker Lake. Tallyoak snowing and -9. Goya Haven snow and -7. Iqaluit mix of sun and cloud and 1 degree. Welcome back. Tourism in the north is on the rise. The 2017 and 18 fiscal years broke records in terms of tourist dollars. More than 110,000 visitors have traveled to Nunavut and the Northwest Territory, spending over $200 million. But getting into the market as an Indigenous business owner can be tricky. Reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs looked into a program that helps entrepreneurs get into this booming business.
Every single person in this room has the potential to leave their mark in the fastest growing industry across the territories, the tourism sector. But they need a little help along the way. That's why 9 entrepreneurs met in Yellowknife to kick off a mentorship program through the not-for-profit Entrepreneur. Mary Adjun is a Nuvialawit and has been running a sport hunting business for 6 years in Kurluktuk. But now she's learning how to shift into ecotourism and attract clients from beyond North America.
Because there isn't any other tourism like us, like what we want to do, that we're paving the way, I think, for our future, you know, any other young entrepreneur that wants to come and start something like this.
What am I going to do? What am I going to learn? The diverse group of entrepreneurs are asking questions about everything from finances to branding and creating a network of support with their peers. Lead facilitator Jacqueline Jennings kickstarted the program by having entrepreneurs spend a lot of time honing in on their vision.
Because we are leading an Indigenized program, what we recognize is that our people don't tend to think about starting a business solely for personal gain or wealth. Almost everyone that we talk to has big dreams for how they can create abundance and economic growth for their community and their nation and their family.
James McPherson offers hiking, fishing, canoe trips, wildlife tours, and more with his business, Satu Adventures Incorporated. He wants to strengthen his culture and provide jobs in a region of the NWT most known for oil and gas.
Most tourism businesses here in my region are from the south, and they're up there for their 3-4 month season, and then they're gone for the rest of the 8 months. So I don't see a sustainable economy happening with that. I feel that with the money staying in the Satu region, we could do a lot more with the money staying in. And
this is the second year of Entrepreneur, with the first cohort proving to be a success.
We have such special stories up north.
Alumni like Tanya Larson says the program offered a roadmap that changed her business.
One of our biggest strengths up north is the network. And I was like, I wouldn't be able to do it without elders who teach me how to tan hides, without hunters who go out hunting on the land, and without other, practitioners who tan hides, who do all of this work. And without their support and their strength, I don't think I would be able to have a successful business.
I'm hoping to start my own tour company here.
The mentorship runs 9 months, with more meetups in Whitehorse, Hanakalui. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Well, that is your news for this Monday, Election Day, ahead of the results rolling in tonight. I would encourage you, even if you haven't been paying attention up till now, that's fine. You can go to our website, aptnnews.ca, click on our Vote 2019 link. It will give you a perfect primer as you're watching the results rolling in. Come back here at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, where we will have live election coverage. You're not going to want to miss it. I'm Melissa Ridgen. See you back here for that.